It's when a child isn't yet saying words at the age that we expect that parents sometimes start to become concerned about their development and wonder, could it just be a speech or language delay, or could it be autism? And at the end of the video, you can take a free questionnaire to help you know if there is reason for concern that your child may be showing some signs of autism spectrum disorder. So since we're talking about a speech or language delay and autism, let's talk about what these two things are. Basically, a speech or language delay is when a child isn't showing the speech or language skills that we expect for their age group, like understanding words or saying their first words. Sometimes in these cases, children need a little extra help, such as speech therapy, to help reach their age-appropriate milestones. While children with speech or language delays have a more challenging time learning to express themselves with any form of communication or using words, it doesn't necessarily point to a larger developmental concern if it's just a speech delay alone with no other concerns. So now let's talk about autism, or you may hear it referred to as autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. Autism, on the other hand, affects how a child communicates, interacts with others, and experiences the world around them. Meaning it's not just their communication that's affected or delayed, it's their overall experience interacting with the world around them. And because autism is a spectrum, it can look very different from one person to another. Okay, so now that you understand the general differences, I want to explain 5 specific ways that autism and a speech or language delay can look different in children. Please remember that these are not all of the signs, and that just because your child may demonstrate one of these signs, it does not mean that your child has autism. Difference number 1 is showing interest and social communication. This one is really important, and honestly, it would be the one thing that I hope you take away from this video. Toddlers with autism often face challenges in showing interest and engaging in social communication precursors, which are the early building blocks of interaction, the why behind learning to communicate and use words, the natural interest to connect. These difficulties, or just simple differences, can manifest in various different ways, affecting how they connect with others and how they respond to their environment. So I'm going to share some ways that you might see this appear. They might have some limited joint attention. So typically, developing toddlers naturally share interest with others, such as pointing to an object and looking to their caregiver to see if they notice it too. Toddlers with autism may not initiate this, and they may not respond to attempts to build joint attention. For example, they might focus intently on something like the spinning wheel of a toy car without trying to check to see if other people are interested or trying to show it to someone else. The second way that social communication may develop differently is delayed or absent use of gestures. Gestures like pointing, waving, or reaching to be picked up are ways that children express interest and direct attention. Children with autism may not use gestures consistently or at all. Instead, they may prefer to act independently, maybe simply taking their caregiver's hand and leading them to what they want. The next way that social communication may develop differently for children with autism is that there may be a difference in their response to social cues. So when a parent smiles, claps, or calls their child's name, a child will typically respond with excitement, turning their head, or sharing a smile. Toddlers with autism may seem a bit indifferent to this or just unresponsive. It may seem that they are more so in their own world rather than sharing that moment with another person. The fourth way that social communication or interaction with others may develop differently for children with autism is that you may see a preference for solitary play. So rather than showing an interest in playing with their peers or playing with their caregivers, they may be more interested in self-directed play or repetitive play. There's a lot of different ways that this could present. It could look like stacking blocks repeatedly, could look like watching the same video repeatedly, or even the same video segment repeatedly. But the point is that they're not really responding to other people's attempts to get involved with that and participate in it, and they're not inviting others to share in that moment with them. These differences do not mean that children with autism lack interest entirely. It's often just expressed differently. They might just be deeply curious about the way something works, about a specific object or pattern, and it may just not be in the socially shared way that we might expect. And that is why early intervention is so important and can be so helpful to help model joint attention, to help encourage your child to use gestures and connect and communicate even more, to help bridge these gaps over time, but also to help you understand how your child is different and how your child may be trying to communicate with you in ways that you may not have realized yet. So sometimes children with a speech or language delay may also have delayed joint attention or use of gestures, but the point is that it's usually just delayed and it's not developing differently overall. And with some intervention or speech therapy, these skills develop as expected, just on a little later of a timeline. But it is the foundational social communication precursors that we just talked about that drive these skills to develop. Let's talk about difference number 2 overall, which is the pattern of language development. This is how the difference in their actual language, the words that they use, can develop differently for children that have autism. This one's interesting because children with a language delay who have difficulty learning to say their first words, they typically still develop language in the same order. First, they understand words, and then later they learn to use words. But it's possible that children with autism may do this in a different order. They may learn words from songs or TV shows, but then not necessarily use these words to communicate. Or they might know things like numbers and their ABCs or colors, but they may not understand simple instructions. Things just seem to develop a little differently in terms of their order. And it all comes back to the why behind communication and connecting. So even though they may be able to repeat things or repeat words, they still may need some help learning to communicate and use these same words in a meaningful way for communication. And sometimes this can give parents a false sense of their child's communication development or language development, thinking that maybe their language skills are a bit ahead of what they actually are when we think about how they're actually communicating with us. I know that remembering how many words the child should say by a certain age or what they should be doing in terms of their communication, whether it's gestures or understanding words, can seem like a lot to remember, especially because it's changing month by month. So that's why I made a free roadmap of communication from when a child is born all the way to when they're 5 and entering kindergarten, so that you know exactly what to expect, and you can get that for free down in the description below. Difference number 3 between children that may have a speech or language delay and autism is going to be about their pretend play. Pretend play is a really big one. It tells us a lot. And by the time a child is 2 years old, whether they have a speech or language delay or not, they should be able to engage in pretend play. You know, this might be like pretending to feed their stuffed animal with a spoon or pretending to talk on a phone. But research shows us that children with autism may not engage in pretend play in the same way. Instead of pretending, they may be more focused and interested in doing something in a repetitive way, or how something works, sort of interested in the gears of something, just not playing with something in the way that we would expect it to be played with, like a car going down a ramp, or like I said, feeding a stuffed animal, putting a stuffed animal to bed, something like that. We all know how toys are supposed to be played with, so there may just be a difference in the way that a child with autism is interacting with those same toys. Difference number 4, which you may have heard of, is sensory avoidance. Something else that's sometimes different for children that show signs of autism is that they may also show us some sensory avoidances. This one's a little bit different, and it all goes back to how every child really is unique and different, so it may present differently in your child, but generally speaking, children with a speech or language delay are generally okay with the hustle and bustle of everyday life. The sound of the vacuum in the background doesn't necessarily bother them. Having a big change in their routine may not be a giant issue for them. Getting a big hug from you doesn't seem to bother them. This may be different, though, for a child that has sensory avoidances. Maybe they will cover their ears when they hear the blender going really loudly. Maybe they will pull up their feet when they feel grass because they don't like that sensation. It's really about sensory differences, though. And this is what I think it's really important to understand. And again, all goes back to how every child is different. But children may actually seek more sensory experiences, like they may like a really tight hug, or it could be a sensory avoidance where they don't like loud noises or something like that. You might see them cover their ears when the blender's on. It's mainly just to look out for differences in how they're processing the world around them. Difference number 5 is something to look out for, but it's not the same across the board, and it's eye contact. With children on the autism spectrum, eye contact can be a bit tricky. It might seem like they're avoiding it. It might seem like they have some difficulty following what you're pointing to. But I always like to remind parents that the simple act of not making eye contact really isn't the problem here. It's the fact that they're not making eye contact in a way that we would expect that points to a potential deeper issue, one that's related to their intent to engage and communicate with the world around them, even in nonverbal ways. On the other hand, children with a speech or language delay don't tend to have these same differences when it comes to eye contact. They can still engage with you in that way, even if they have some trouble with their words. So this is one thing that sets autism apart from a speech or language delay. So if you're sitting there wondering, okay, where does my child fit into all of this? Know that you're not alone, and every parent that I speak to just wants to best understand their child in order to best help them. Of course, noticing these signs or starting to notice that there may be some differences in the way that your child is developing their engagement and communication doesn't mean that you have all the answers, and that is okay. It's just a starting place. As a speech therapist working with so many children and families, I can tell you from firsthand experience that the best thing you can do for your child is to look for resources in your local community to get them early intervention. If after watching this video, you have some concerns that your child may be showing some signs of autism, you can take your research even a bit further by doing a questionnaire that's free called the MChat. And this is the modified checklist for autism in toddlers. It's quick, it's simple, you can do it at home. It's just 20 yes or no questions. Questions like, does your child point to share something with you? Do they respond when you call their name? Other questions like this. So I'll put the link down in the description below. If you would like more information about how to help your child respond when you call their name, I would suggest watching the video that I've linked down in the description below as well. Taking this questionnaire does not give your child a diagnosis, of course, but it will help you figure out if maybe it's time to go ahead and chat with a specialist like a speech therapist or your pediatrician. It really does take about 5 minutes, less amount of time than it takes to finish your coffee. So don't delay, go ahead and do that today if you do have concerns that perhaps your child is developing some signs of autism. And I do just want to reassure you as a parent that no matter what you're seeing with your child, you are already doing the right thing by watching this video because it tells me that you're paying attention. And whether your child has a speech or language delay or autism, early support can make such a huge difference. If you found this video helpful, please do me a favor by liking and subscribing, maybe even leaving a comment down below of why you found it helpful, because that helps me make more videos just like this to help families just like yours.